Hey guys, Magnus here, and yes, I'll make a tier on anything, okay? I know some people have been criticizing me about that, but it's okay. You don't have to watch. Anyway, today I thought what we'd do is a lineup on the tier. Wait, what? No, a tier about the lineup. So obviously, at the end of season 6 and the start of season 7, Negan, of course, kills both Glenn and Abraham. And now a lot of fans have clearly didn't think Glenn should have died. Some obviously argue, well, it happened in the comics, it was essential for the story, so he should have died. Some people disagree with having 2 kills. They think that Glenn would have been enough and that Glenn's death kind of overshadowed Abraham's, which I agree with. And then people also say that, X character should have been in the lineup instead, or B, etc., etc. So I've just used this tier here, the notable character, what is it called, main TWD characters one. And to be honest, I'm using this one, but obviously it's got a bunch of characters who are relevant. But whatever. I also had to add Morgan because for some weird reason this tier didn't have Morgan, or I just couldn't spot him. But I don't think it actually has Morgan, which is weird. Now, I've also got a few extra characters. So we'll go through all the lineup characters first, which are obviously all here. I've ordered them at the top. And then we're going to go through some others who weren't at the lineup but could have been. So obviously we have Carol, Tara, Morgan, Gabriel, Spencer, Enid, Heath, and then I guess Olivia as well, because she was on this tier, so we'll do her too. So then we'll rank those characters as well, of whether or not they would have been good kills. So we're talking specifically about the Negan kills themselves. Now obviously not every character can die. I'm not saying that they should have killed more than 2 people. I personally think probably only one person probably should have died at the lineup. I think killing Glenn and Abraham overshadowed Abraham's death. Less so, I feel. I felt that strongly at the time. I think in season 7, at least, Abraham's death definitely feels consequential. We feel that through Sasha and Rosita. But I feel like after Sasha goes and Rosita kind of fades a little bit in the background for a bit, I feel like that kind of goes away and that we don't really have the consequences of Abraham's death anymore, whereas the ones for Glenn really do carry. But I don't know. I think killing 2 people. I do feel like Abraham probably should have died. And I think the lineup death actually worked. We'll do Abraham first whilst we're going. So I actually feel like Abraham is an S tier lineup victim on his own in a vacuum. I think my problem with him being killed in the lineup is that it is overshadowed by Glenn. I think everything that was leading up to this was perfect, right? We have Abraham's arc. He starts in season 4, obviously as this man with a mission. In season 5, he learns the mission's all a lie, and we actually learned that he was planning on killing himself, right, after he found his family dead, and Eugene's mission was the only thing that kept him going. And then after that, he was trying to find a purpose in life, and he realized that he wanted a family. He realized that he wanted to actually, start anew. But at the same time, Rosita was just essentially, like being brutally honest, Rosita was just an attractive fuck buddy for him, basically, right? It wasn't someone he wanted to be with. It's not someone he was like truly in love with. But he found that in Sasha, right? He found like that defiant spirit that was just like him in Sasha, so he wanted to pursue a family with Sasha. That was his goal, and I think kind of we get him forgiving Eugene in the finale. We get all those really nice scenes of him wrapping up his character, and then I think to kill him there works really well. And so I think that Abraham is an S tier lineup victim, but it doesn't have the same weight as someone like Glenn, right? Someone who's been there from the beginning. So I can understand why a lot of people don't like. Now, I don't think you have to have a big death, right, to start the war, because I think killing Abraham enough in that brutal fashion is, and torturing Daryl and etc., etc., I think that would be enough, personally, to motivate them to fight against the Saviors. I mean, the fact that the Saviors are basically enslaving them is enough motivation. But I guess people would say, well, what about the consequences for all Rick has done leading up to that? And I understand that too. Like, we probably should have a big death. But I think Glenn's death could work too. I don't think it works currently. In the version we get, my biggest problem with Glenn's death in the lineup isn't to do with the fact that he's killed in a brutal fashion. It isn't to do with the fact that I don't think he should have died. It really comes down to the fact that Glenn, his arc was not complete. He kind of dies very abruptly, and the build up to it wasn't there. If you rewatch season 6 and then go straight on to season 7, you can see this quite clearly, because Glenn at the end of episode 15 of season 6 leaves. I think he leaves to go find Daryl, and then he of course gets kidnapped off screen, right? And that's basically the last we see of Glenn other than the lineup. And that's just not, it doesn't finish his arc, right? What was Glenn's arc in season 6? Well, I think it was mostly the stuff that he said to Enid, people you love, they made you who you are and all that, and kind of Glenn sort of, we have all that stuff earlier on with him, I guess, reflecting on those he's lost and, saving Maggie. And then we have the stuff in the later half, which is Glenn being basically forced into doing immoral acts, right? And realizing that he can't be a bystander anymore and he has to kill people. Now, I think the problem is he doesn't have a clear arc in season 6. There's multiple things there. So what I probably would do is rework season 6, where Glenn actually has, I think with the Nicholas situation, for example, I think honestly, instead of Nicholas shooting himself in the head, have Glenn make the decision, right? Well, fuck. Basically, he kills Nicholas, right? Nicholas leads him down a thing. Nicholas is like, I'm sorry, man, I'm sorry. And Glenn's like, you've got us both killed. And he's like, I'm sorry. And Glenn, I don't know, uses Nicholas to get out of that situation. And don't do the whole fake out death. Let's change that, because that kind of takes away from Glenn's death too. And I think Glenn should have done something, right, to basically kill Nicholas, even though he saved him prior. I think keep all that, right? But in this situation, it's him or Nicholas. He chooses him, and he basically he does something really immoral, and that sticks with him. And when he returns to Maggie, that really has it's tormenting him. And then we have the stuff with the saviors, right, where he kills the saviors. And I think in this instance, after the shootout with him and Heath in the satellite outpost, I think Glenn should be on the same warpath, right? And instead of having Daryl, Denise, and Rosita, I think switch out Rosita, have it be Glenn, Daryl, and Denise, right? And, Glenn's really close to Denise, because obviously Denise is close to Tara, etc., etc. Denise gets killed, obviously, in the thing, on the tracks by Dwight. And Glenn is on a fucking warpath, just like Daryl. And I, to be honest, I don't even think you have Daryl on the warpath. Let's take it away from Daryl. Give it to Glenn instead, right? Glenn is on a warpath. And maybe even Daryl says, listen, man, I think, if you carry on going with it, you're going to get yourself killed, right? We'll literally switch those positions. And Glenn's like, I'm doing this for Maggie, right? And he's like, no, you're not. You're doing this for revenge. And he's like, no. But these people, he's kind of like, these people could have done that to Maggie, right? They wouldn't have known she was pregnant. What if they did that to her? What if she? And maybe actually we have a scene where Maggie previously was going to go on this mission with Denise, right? And he's like, what if Maggie was here? What if they did that to Maggie, right? They didn't know she was pregnant. They would have killed her, right? And I think having Glenn on that warpath and it kind of ultimately leading to his demise, I think works quite well. And then it also would work for Rick, right? With the fact that Rick's broken, where Maggie's like, we need to get ready, right? We need to get ready to fight them. And Rick's like, listen, Glenn tried that and he fucking died. And then that way we could have some conflict with Rick and Maggie too, right? Because Rick's like, listen, if it wasn't for Glenn and his fucking warpath, maybe we weren't in this situation, right? Maybe we could have had a different way. Glenn got himself kidnapped, which kind of caused this shit, right? And he wasn't there when he needed you and all that. And maybe, we can have Rick kind of casting shade on Glenn a little bit, right? Ultimately, obviously, Rick doesn't mean it. He's just kind of saying that to dissuade Maggie. But we can have some really good conflict there too between Rick and Maggie, which I felt was missing in season 7 for me. And I think could have actually helped that season a lot more if they're hellbent on separating the All Out War into 2 seasons, or the build up to All Out War and All Out War into 2 seasons. But I think Glenn could work. Oh, I probably should have said the tiers. So I have S tier lineup victim, could work, needs some rewriting earlier, would be a disaster and ruin the show. Let's go. So I've explained both of them, the actual 2 lineups. Now let's talk about ones that were potentials. So first, Rick. I think this is a ruin the show. I think killing off Rick, like there after all this, time with him being the protagonist, I think it's an unceremonial way to kill off Rick. I don't think it would work personally. I feel like it would ruin the show. So that one's easy for me. I don't really need to explain that much more, I hope. Yeah. Maggie. I think Maggie would be a bit of a disaster. The reason why, I'm not going to say it would ruin the show, because I don't think her death would ruin the show, but I feel like it would be a disaster for numerous reasons. A, she's pregnant. That would be fucking horrible, right? There's no way we could ever redeem Negan now. There's no way ever we could see Negan in a good light, because he's literally murdered a pregnant woman and obviously in the course, her child. B, obviously there's no way we can spare Negan now as well. Negan has to die because of that too. But B, it's just that, again, Maggie, I think is a far more interesting character to just have her murdered here. I think, don't get me wrong, I'm not, the biggest Maggie fan post-Season 6, but I feel like she's pretty damn solid in Season 7, pretty damn solid in Season 8. She kind of leads the Hilltop story arc, I guess, and I think without her, you kind of... which character's really going to replace her there? There isn't really one. And she fits naturally into that leadership position. I feel like it would have been a bit of a disaster to kill Maggie off. I know there's that leaked scene that everyone likes to play and go oh, I wish it was her instead of Glenn. Which, I think that's silly. Could they get it to work? Sure, but I think ultimately it would be a bit of a disaster. I guess the Glenn one technically needs some rewriting earlier, actually. I've already explained that. So yeah, I'll move Glenn there. Maggie is now would be a disaster. We got Daryl. Now, Daryl I think actually could work. Now, hold off, Daryl fans. I know they're all going to be seething in the comments. So, Daryl is a big character, right? He's a character since Season 1. He's a fan favourite, so that would feel... that would feel weight. Oh, actually, wait, no, I changed my mind. He's an S-tier lineup victim. I feel like his arc leads up to his death. Like I was saying with the Glenn stuff, right? With his warpath. That's what Daryl was on. He was on a warpath. He knew he was going to get, he was putting people's lives at risk, right? So here's how I feel like the Daryl thing, and this is a slight rework to his death. Let's not have the cliffhanger, for example. I think Negan picks someone like Glenn, right? Negan picks Glenn. And, Negan's he's about to kill Glenn. And Daryl's no. Take it from, Daryl's I got him here. It was all me, right? I convinced Rick to do the attacks. I did it all. If you want to kill someone, kill me, right? And Daryl does that sacrifice. And Negan decides, fuck it. Yeah, sure. I'll do you then, right? Maybe even Glenn's no, Daryl, don't. It's fine, Yeah, he's going to kill me, whatever. Maybe it wouldn't be as big of a surprise then, but have that build up, have Daryl actually sacrifice himself. I think that could really work and be an S-tier lineup victim. Now, obviously, Daryl does go on to do a lot of stuff later on. Obviously, he basically becomes the protagonist in Season 9. But unironically, I feel like Daryl being the death here and leaving both Glenn and Abraham alive, I think that has about the same weight as Glenn and Abraham's death, because Daryl's such a fan favorite. Everyone probably expected him to be safe. I think that would be very surprising as well. So yeah, ultimately I feel like Daryl would have been an S tier kill. I think his arc led up to this as well. He was on his warpath. He wasn't listening to anyone. He was just going on. He was going after Dwight. He was involved in the satellite outpost. All this, right? And he has that connection to Dwight too. And I think as well, you kind of have then Dwight sort of fall that role of the crossbow man, right? And their little feud together, I think you do through, you can still facilitate that little feud between Daryl and Dwight through Rosita or through Tara. And I think that way you actually give Tara more to do, right? Because Dwight was the one who killed her girlfriend. And I know Tara gets all mad and angry and all that, but they flip-flop constantly, and it's so annoying. Daryl and Tara flip-flop of whether or not they want to kill Dwight today. They literally they keep changing their minds. But I think just give that to Tara instead, and have Tara be the one to communicate with Dwight, right? She's the one forced to do that and keeping an eye on him, that kind of thing. And then that whole Daryl forgiving Dwight and exiling him, you give that scene to Tara. It gives more for Tara to do, right? Although I feel like Tara probably should have died earlier, but that's one solution, I guess. Yeah. Daryl, I think, would have actually been an S tier lineup victim. I think it really could have worked. It would have shaken up the show as much, if not more, than Glenn and Abraham's death. And yes, the comics obviously does kill does kill Glenn in that lineup. But there's other ways you can do it. Have Glenn be kidnapped, right? Instead of Negan taking Daryl hostage, he takes Glenn hostage, right? He takes Glenn, and so the whole thing is like Maggie is not motivated to avenge Glenn. More so, she's motivated to save Glenn. Have Negan send Maggie like pieces of Glenn's fingers or some shit, right? Really torment Glenn. Really send him through the fucking ringer. And have Daryl be the one who died. So yeah, I think Daryl could actually work. I feel like he would be an S tier lineup victim personally. So sue me. Rosita. Maybe it's just my inner misogyny. I don't feel like comfortable with any of the women getting their heads bashed in. But I think Rosita could have worked with some like rewriting earlier. My biggest problem with Rosita being killed here is I just don't think she's a big enough character. I think especially like at this stage in season 6, because like I think she definitely like holds her own a bit more in season 7 and in season 8, but by like season 4, 5, 6, Rosita just isn't a big character, and that's my biggest problem with her being. I feel like Aaron is probably at that point a bigger character than Rosita, although she definitely becomes a much bigger character, like I said, in season 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. At this point, she really wasn't a character, so I think like the only way it could work is if there was some like major rewriting previously, but I just don't think her death like. It'll definitely impact Abraham. It'll definitely impact Eugene. And, like, I think probably, like, Glenn, Maggie. I don't think it really impacts Rick that much. I don't think it impacts Michonne that much. So to me, I just feel like this one would only really work with some, like, major rewriting. Sasha, I think could work. I feel like it's the same though. Same arguments with Rosita. I think it could work only if Sasha was a more involved character, especially considering Sasha had been like fairly absent from most of the group members like prior to this. Like she's been distant with everyone. The only person it would really impact is obviously Abraham. But Rosita probably wouldn't be that bothered because this woman stole her man. Glenn would probably be a bit bummed out. Maggie would be definitely bummed out. It would hurt Maggie a lot. I just feel like, again, it's like, same with Rosita. She's not a big enough character for it to have much impact, really. I'm going to go Eugene. I feel like Eugene could work quite well. Eugene led them all to like this place, essentially, right? Eugene had already sacrificed himself. He'd already made that big sacrifice by driving the RV. He was the one who led them all to DC, obviously. That was his, although obviously he was lying, they still decided to go on the DC mission. So he basically led them all to Alexandria, which ultimately led them to the lineup. Eugene has been a coward all of his life, and he kind of ends his arc, I guess, in season 6 of finally being like doing something ultimately brave and risking his life for everyone else. And I think it could work with him ultimately dying to the lineup. Now, I feel like, yes, he's not as big of a character, so you do kind of lose that a little bit. Like, obviously, Eugene. He's a major-ish character, but at this point he wasn't like big. But I do feel like with all the fact that his arc is leading up to it, and the fact that he does everyone acknowledges the fact that he did something brave, and I think this would affect Rosita, it would affect Abraham, and I think like it would affect Rick a lot too, and Maggie, right, and Glenn. I think this one would have, especially if they harp on the fact that he led them all to Alexandria, even if he did lie. Ultimately, everything he did led them here, so I think it could. It could technically work. Let's do Michonne. I think Michonne would be a disaster. I just feel like nothing was leading to her dying there. Nothing was leading to her dying there. We were just getting into the Rick. There again, actually, no. I'm gonna say could work. Yeah, Michonne could work because she's Rick's woman, right? She's Rick's. Her and Rick are together. Michonne obviously has that massive bond with Carl. I think Michonne's a character who's been there for long enough, since the end of season 2, but basically season 3. She has a strong connection to pretty much everyone, I'd say, but more so obviously Rick, Carl, Maggie for sure, Glenn for sure, and Sasha, I'd say as well. Sasha, yeah, and Rosita. So, and Daryl, of course, because they have their little flirting in season 3. So I think she's a character who, like, her death would definitely be felt in all the group, especially Rick. But I think the problem is like Rick's arc in season 7 is not motivated to fight until, like, you know, he is motivated to fight until the end, obviously, where he's like, Negan, I don't give a fuck, you can kill my son, but I'm still motivated to fight. So I don't know if, like, you can have Rick not be motivated after losing Michonne, but maybe actually if, you know, he loses Michonne, but there's also the chance he could lose Carl. Maybe that's what motivates him, actually, you know, and like, that's what makes him kind of not want to fight at first, and then eventually he's motivated to fight later on after talking with Maggie and Spencer and Lilyvia's death and all that. So, yeah, I don't know. I think it could work, to be fair, but I just don't like it, I guess. I don't like it personally, but I think it probably could work. Aaron, I think, is the same vein as Rosita, Sasha, and the others. Well, Rosita and Sasha, in the fact that he's just not a big enough character. I don't think anyone would really care. So he would have to be made a much bigger character for it to work. But the problem was that he was only introduced in season 5. And obviously we're at the end of season 6. So unless you give him an entire, like, large season arc in season 6 and he becomes like a, you know, a major, like, 1 season character, like, put him on the main cast bill, give him, like, loads of spotlight and loads of green light and loads of spotlight, right? A big spotlight. You give him, like, a profound arc in season 6. I don't think his death works as a big enough death. And even then, right, it won't, I actually feel like his would be a disaster in the sense that he's just not, it wouldn't, like, the lineup would just mean nothing. Like, who gives a fuck, right? Oh, Aaron's dead, who cares? That's what I would generally feel like. So I don't even know why Aaron was there. I don't think Aaron should have been there, personally. I think he was the one character that, I feel like he was the safest character there, because I knew that no one would give a fuck if he died. So I knew that they weren't going to kill Aaron. So yeah, I just don't think he's a big enough character. I think it would severely hurt the lineup if he was the only victim of it. So yeah, I think his would be a disaster. Carl would ruin the show. Killing Carl in the lineup, same things I said about Rick. Killing Carl would basically, Rick would be fucking defeated, and there'd be no point, like, there'd be no way to redeem Negan. You know, the same thing I was saying about Maggie. But on top of that, you're killing, like, Rick's son in the most brutal, disgusting fashion. There's no way Rick spares Negan, of course. He has to kill Negan after that. There's no way he can forgive him. There's no way Carl can even write a letter because he's got his head bashed in. So yeah, that would ruin the show. I think everyone would probably agree to that. So now we've done all the lineup victims. We've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11. Yeah, so we got all 11 of our lineup victims. So that's how I'd personally rank the actual lineup victims. I think Abraham and Daryl would have been the perfect. Either one of them would have been perfect. Now, do we kill Glenn eventually? Maybe we kill him at the end of the Whisper War. Maybe we kill him at the end of Savior War. I'm not sure, right? But I think, and I do think, like, Glenn's could have worked really, really well. Like I said, I just wanted a bit more rewriting first. But yeah, I feel like Daryl really could have worked with everything they set up, and so could and I think Abraham did work quite well. But it's just his was overshadowed by Glenn. Eugene and Michonne, I think, could definitely work too. Although I feel like Eugene probably should have been a bit of a bigger character, but I definitely think they could have made it work with the fact that he led them there. And etc, etc. I've explained the rest. So now we've got a few extras, like people who weren't at the lineup but definitely could have been. So let's go with Carol first. I think Carol could probably work too. Again, she's a character been there from the beginning. You know, she essentially was, her entire arc in season 6 was not being cool with killing anymore, right? And the fact that murdering all these people and all these murders she's committed have, like, slowly ate away at her humanity. And yeah, I don't know, like, killing her at the end of season 6 after that arc, and after sort of learning that she doesn't want to kill anymore, and then choosing to, or be accepting the fact that she's going to be the sacrificial lamb to save the rest of the group. or at least spare the rest of the group from being killed by Negan. I don't know. I think could work, right? Maybe probably needs a bit more rewriting, but yeah, not to the point where I put her any lower. I'm gonna leave her on the could work tier. Tara, I personally wouldn't care. I feel like it'd be a disaster. I don't think she's a big enough character. Maybe I put her with. No, I wouldn't even put her with like Rosita, because at least like Rosita has like a clear person it would affect. Abraham, Eugene. Sasha has a clear person it would affect. Abraham, right? Tara doesn't have that because Denise is already dead, and Denise, even if she was alive, isn't a big enough character. Like, it would probably affect Glenn, sure, but maybe Maggie. But I don't know if it's the same. It's like a friend, right? Not to the same extent. So for me, I feel like Tara would, again, they would just make the lineup kind of like, who would care? Morgan. Now I feel like Morgan, unironically, S tier victim. And how brutal would it have been if Morgan was at the lineup because of all of Rick's murdering, right? And the fact that Morgan had been preaching peace this entire time, and spare it, like doing things like the right way. How fucking brutal would it have been if Morgan was the victim, right? If Negan picked Morgan to die after Morgan was like the most innocent character in all of Rick's attacks and stuff on the Sanctuary, right? That would have been so fucking brutal, and I could see it demoralizing Rick to the point where he's like, there's no point fighting, there's no point, like, Morgan was right, we shouldn't have killed people, right? We shouldn't have done that satellite outpost, we should have found another way. That was fucking brutal, right? What we did, we should have, like, tried to see it, we should have negotiated a deal with them, etc., right? We shouldn't have done what we did. That was disgusting, right? And if Rick's, like, demoralized to the point, and that kind of goes into his arc of not wanting to fight the Saviors. Of course, then eventually leading to him wanting to fight the Saviors later on. But I feel like that could really motivate Rick, like demoralize him. Yeah, Morgan's death would be just brutally ironic, brutally sad, especially because Morgan was like the most peaceful person, obviously, at this point anyway. Yeah, I feel like it could be an S tier victim. Obviously, he wasn't at the lineup, and that sucks, but whatevs. Gabriel, ruin the shit. No, I just think Gabriel would be a disaster because at that point, Gabriel was not very well liked. I think fans were starting to like him a bit more at this point, but I don't think he was that liked. And he's just not a big enough character. He'd only been there since season 5. He barely did anything in season 5 really. He had like a little bit of an arc, but he was definitely like a side character. And then in season 6, yeah, he did a few things here and there. He had a few cool badass moments, but ultimately Gabriel it wasn't a big enough character. I feel like it would have been a disaster. Even if they did some rewriting, I just don't think he would have been a big enough character to really have that impact. Same goes for Spencer, of course. Again, not a big enough character. I feel like his death would be a disaster. No one would care. Same for Olivia. Same for Heath. Judith would probably ruin the show because by this point Judith was a toddler. So if Negan bashed in Judith's little head, I feel like again we could never forgive Negan, and I think it would probably ruin the show. And Enid. I guess Enid, I feel like with some rewriting, possibly, but probably not. I feel like this would probably be a disaster too. It's just probably not a big enough character. She was there, obviously, at the end of season 5, and then we have her all through season 6. We don't even actually know, because we haven't even established the relationship between Enid and Carl by this point, right? They haven't even had their little kiss yet. That's not until season 7. So yeah, it wouldn't even be like it wouldn't be big enough. It wouldn't work. Simon, if Negan just randomly like took out Simon. Yeah, no, I feel like that would be a disaster too. It made no sense. And same with Dwight. And if Negan bashed himself, I feel like that would ruin the show, because that would just like, why did he bash his head in? That'd be dumb. Anyway, yeah, that's it. Well, we're not going to do it. Oh, I guess we could do Jesus. Jesus. Nah, I think it would be a disaster too, because he's just not a big enough character. So at that point, and he doesn't have that big of a connection to any of our core characters. So yeah, my ideal 3 victims for the Negan's lineup would probably be Abraham, Daryl, or Morgan. I think either of these three could have worked. Now, I think Glenn definitely can too. Don't get me wrong. I definitely think Glenn is up here too. I think with the arc that they laid out already. So these S tiers are just based on the story regardless, right? So we're not changing anything really. We can change maybe the lineup scene itself, but we're not changing anything that came before that. And so with that laid out, I think these three characters would have fit perfectly as lineup victims. That being said, Eugene, Carol, and Michonne definitely could work with a few tweaks here and there. Earlier on, they could definitely work, but I feel like the lineup does fundamentally change, I think, with these three people's death, but it definitely could work. And then needs some rewriting, as these characters could definitely work as lineup victims, but would need some major rewriting previously in season 6, or maybe even earlier, to make them like really feel like actual victims. And I think I'm going to knock Rosita down to would be a disaster. I think Sasha probably could work really well, but I don't think Rosita was just a big enough character. I've changed my mind on her. I feel like Eugene's a much bigger character than Rosita at that point too. Rosita doesn't really do much in season 5 and 6. But yeah, I think Glenn and Sasha could work with some rewriting, and then would be a disaster. So these are a few things. Maybe I could split them up. So maybe I'll add a thing below, add a little tier below, to be not a big enough character. So yeah, we'll split them up. So not a big enough character. I think Aaron's there, Tara's there, Gabe's there, Rosita's there, Spencer's there, Olivia's there. Actually, I think Tara's just would be a disaster. Heath's there, Enid's there, Simon, Dwight. Well, actually, no. Simon and Dwight are not because they're big characters. The reason for them is it would just make no sense. But yeah, Maggie and Tara, I feel like would be a disaster. Maggie, because I think there's just far too much story there already, and I think killing her is especially cruel and evil and kind of like, I don't know how you'd ever spare Negan then. Tara, because she's probably not because she's not a big enough character. She's not a connected enough character. I think she's probably she's been around for a bit at that point, but I just feel like she's not connected enough. Dwight and Simon would make no sense. And then like Aaron, Gabe, Spencer, Rosita, Olivia, Heath, Tara, and not Tara, Enid, and Jesus. I just don't think are big enough characters. Jesus kind of is an overlap because he's also just not well connected to our group kind of character. And then ruin the show is Rick, Carl, Judith, and Negan killing himself. Now let me know about your lineup. I'll leave the link to this tier, although it's not the proper lineup tier, because I was too lazy to make my own. What do you think? Who do you think would have been the perfect lineup victim? Do you agree with what the show did? Are you happy with Glenn and Abraham being the victims? Or do you think they should have picked someone else? And yes, obviously, in the comics, Glenn is the victim, and it's only Glenn. But the show has adapted stuff before. Much earlier on, the show was happy to adapt stuff and happy to completely change shit. And I think that's when the show was at its best, personally. So, ultimately, I'm not against swapping out Glenn. I used to hold the belief that Glenn always has to die and that they couldn't swap anyone else. I have changed my mind on that, though. I don't think they had to have killed Glenn. It certainly would have changed the show quite rapidly, that's for sure. But again, if we change things like Glenn getting kidnapped and having pieces chopped off him and sent to Maggie, I think you have like the same Maggie story regardless, right? Or if like alternatively she thinks Glenn is dead, right? She thinks he's dead. I don't know, something else can happen, and maybe, I don't know, Negan says that's it, Glenn's dead, but he's not actually dead, but she thinks he's dead. That could motivate her too. So there's other ways to do it. You don't have to kill him. And I think personally, this is just my hot take, I think they should have killed Daryl. I feel like Daryl would have been the perfect lineup victim. All the fans would have been shocked. Everyone would have been fucking demoralized, including the fan base. It makes sense for Rick to be demoralized and everyone else. But at the same time, Daryl's arc completely led to this. He was on a warpath that he knew would get him killed, and he carried on it anyway. And obviously Rick would be like, yeah, well, we're not going to do what Daryl did and get ourselves killed. And eventually that would motivate Rick to eventually start fighting again. And plus at this point, Daryl's kind of fucking boring. Daryl gets a bit more interesting in season 9. But yeah, I'll sacrifice that for a fucking shocking ass lineup pick. So anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Tell me your thoughts on this idea. I know a lot of Daryl fans are going to disagree, but that's okay. And I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.